Sometimes we act like a fool, not aware we're troublemakers. Sometimes we try to be cool, not being givers, only takers. Stop for a minute, stop and breathe for a minute. Don't get over your head, try to listen instead, won't you? Think for a minute.
So, this is what I've done. I took files from this side, dropped them in there to video edit, and before they went over there, I thought that I had saved them, but I deleted it. So all of these files that I put in there, that I transferred there, this whole day of filming is now lost. I can't save this because this doesn't have a root folder. So all of these things that I've actually done today is all gone. So what do you do? What do you do? So very, very disappointing. Welcome back to part 5. If there's anything that I can teach you about making kilts, it's about perseverance and not losing your cool. I just spent a few hours on my previous presentation and it all went to pot. So here we are. Technically this is part 5. So I'm going to be showing you how to stitch the pleats. So here we go. So in the previous presentation with that story of the computer where I didn't save my files, this is what I previously did. I'm going to be showing you on this seam there exactly what I showed you on this one here. However, the files didn't save. So this is what I'm going to be doing to that side there. So what I've done is I've stitched all the way up and I'm stopping at the buttonhole, and at the buttonhole this will be my next presentation. So I'm going to continue on with this one here and then come back and do the buttonhole at part 6. So this is what I've done. I'm going to be calling the center line the equator. This is the equator. We've got the northern hemisphere and we've got the southern hemisphere. What I'm doing here, this is the equator. I'm going to be mirroring the north to look exactly like the south. So what I've got is there's the equator and there's that black line. It goes large and then tapers into the black line there. I've got the southern equator, the southern hemisphere, and there's my black line there, moving, tapering in and meeting at the black line there. So I've got my equator, north and south, and I'm going to be showing you how to stitch this one exactly like I've stitched that one. The thread that I'm using is silk. I used to use polyester, but I find that silk works very well. It's natural, it doesn't tear, it doesn't break. So what I'm doing is I'm tying a simple knot. This isn't rocket science. And then I've taken about an arm's length of silk, and we've got a couple of guys coming back from the beach. So if you do hear that noise in the background, it's all the four-wheel drives. I live in a beautiful place in Margaret River, and the place where I'm at now is kind of like on the beach. So people that want to go off-road into the beach, they got to drive down my track, which is very annoying, especially if I'm trying to make a video. So over here I've got beeswax, and I take my beeswax and I just thread my silk through the beeswax just a couple of times. And the reason why we use beeswax is that the thread just holds the pleats nicely, and when just holds the pleats nicely. All right. Okay, so just like my previous one, I'm starting in the middle over there. That's my goal line. Can you see that there? But before I start, I'm going to show you a little bit of a cheat that I do. The following is slightly unconventional, but this is what I've had to adapt to as a kilt maker. A few years ago, I was packing boxes when I was moving houses. I moved from Perth in Western Australia to a place called Margaret River, which is 3.5 hours south. And in the garage, I stacked some boxes, and the boxes that I had there fell and crushed my hand. Not severely, but just enough that I couldn't really use full function. You can see I've battled with this thumb a couple of weeks ago when I was putting the bull bar onto my four-wheel drive. Like I said, I live just down the road from a track, and I bought this four-wheel drive and I'm taking it off-road, and it doesn't have a bull bar, so I thought, well, I'll put one on, and I hurt myself again. So here we go. Now, what I've found is when kilt makers make or sew their kilts, some of the kilt makers sit on their tartan in order to pull the tartan tight. I don't do that. This is what I do. It's slightly unconventional. I apologize if I offend anyone, but for you guys that are learning, you might want to adapt this too, because for me, it's one of the few methods that I use, or that I know that is used out there, to keep my tartan always nice and tense or taut. Right, it just makes my seams look that much crisper, and I'll show you this now. On my board that I have there, I have a bungee cord that's connected to the wall, and at the top of my bungee cord I have a clamp, and that clamp is connected to the top of my tartan. And then if I scroll down towards the bottom, I've got another clamp at the bottom of my kilt that's connected to my desk or my workbench. I've got my workbench, and that is connected to that. And the reason for that is when I'm working with my tartan, I want it to be nice and tight. Can you see my left hand? I've got all the material. Here's my thumb. Here's my forefinger. Can you see my forefinger? So what I'm going to be doing now is I'm going to be gauging the movement of this tartan, or the lack of movement, with my thumb, and I'm going to be stitching with my right hand. So my left thumb is keeping the equator nice and steady, and I've got my clamp up at the top and a clamp down at the bottom, just keeping my tartan nice and taut. So I don't leave it on. Once I've stitched the seam, I take it off, and you'll see how nice the seams look. And this again is just an example of what I use just to make, for me, easier stitching wise. All right, here we go. The first stitch. Can you see I've got the black line on the northern hemisphere? There's the equator and the southern hemisphere. Can you see the black line is slightly aft, and this black line is slightly forward. So I'm starting in the center of these two black lines, but my needle is going to be working at a 45-degree angle. So I start in the southern hemisphere, and I pull my thread. There's the knot. The knot goes in the center. I grab the north, and can you see there's that loop? Can you see the loop there? I bring my needle through the loop to tie it off. Now, with silk, you don't want to be pulling too hard or else it breaks. So I do it one more time, in the same area. I'm pulling it nice and slowly. Go through the loop. There we go. Right. Now that my finger is on the equator, I'll take that pin out and I'll take that pin out. But I must always make sure that my northern hemisphere is slightly aft and my southern hemisphere is forward. My first stitch, I'm keeping my stitching small, so that's it there. I don't want to take more cloth than that. Where are we there? All right. Now with my thumb, I'm holding the equator. With my forefinger down at the bottom there, I'm holding all the material at the bottom. So I'm actually pinching like that. All right, I'm actually pinching like that. I've got the two bungee cords pulling my cloth nice and tight. Moving at a 45-degree angle. Nice and slowly, just moving that up. And what I'm going to be doing is making about 25 stitches per inch. I don't want to go any smaller than that, and I don't want to go any larger than that. So for me, 25 inches is perfect. Now can you see when I hold my needle, I'm holding right down at the tip. So this just gives me more movement. All right. So I'm holding it down at the. I'm not holding it down there. Just nice, because I'm feeling. I'm using my finger as leverage. Again, 45-degree angle. Making sure that the northern hemisphere is always aft. Can you see that? It's slightly behind. Now this tartan that I'm using is called the Douglas. It's a beautiful tartan. I've got my own kilt that I made using this tartan. This green, it's very hard to judge where you're at, but this black line there is giving me an indication as to how close I am to it. So I'm getting very close to it, just as long as my northern hemisphere matches my southern hemisphere. So what I'm doing in the north, I go through the equator, and I'm just making sure that the north and the south match. So can you see I'm still in the green, but my next stitch is going to be in the black. Can you see? Top of the black, through the equator, down to the south. So there's my first stitch. What do you think? Can you even see the stitches? Now with a tartan like this, I'm using black thread. When you use thread, always go a darker color. For some reason, if you use a lighter color, you can actually see it. Alright, so now I'm going into the black. Top black, bottom black, exactly the same. So a quarter in, a quarter in. So whatever I do in the northern hemisphere, I'm doing in the southern hemisphere as well. Just going through the equator. 3/4 of the way through the black. And now at the end of the black, going through there. So because my tartan is pulled, one clamp is pulling that way and another clamp is pulling this way, it's always giving me the advantage of a nice tight tartan. So what I'm doing now is, it might look a little bit wonky, but as soon as I unleash the clamps, then I just massage it and then the tartan will go back in. Because we are using, this is an organic material, it's somewhat flexible. Alright, so now my next gauge is that blue line. Can you see the blue line there? Although I'm going into the green, I've just got to make sure that that blue line on the northern equator is slightly behind on the southern. For me, it's pretty close. So what I do is I pull this down a little, and then there's my gauge there. Can you see that? There we go there. So that's it there. So with this thumb, I'm holding it nicely in place. All right. So now I go through the greens. Northern equator, northern hemisphere, go through the equator to the southern. And what I do at the top, I'm going to do at the bottom. Now also taking into consideration, can you see this black line there? That black line has to mirror this black line there. So I'm not only stitching, but I'm very conscious of my eye. This top there in the north has to mirror the same as what I'm doing down at the south. So take your time, 25 stitches an inch. I've got an 8-inch from the bottom to the top. So it doesn't take that long to do. So I'm coming closer to the blue. That's my gauge. Can you see there? Just as long as the northern hemisphere is slightly aft. Alright, so can you see the top of the green to the top of the green there? The north and south are identical. Remember, my needle is always going at a 45-degree angle. Alright? Alright, I've got one more stitch in the green. Now north in the blue, south in the blue. A quarter of the way in, half half, 3/4 in. And now the top of the blue and the bottom of the blue. There we go, done. So can you see? Nice, beautiful stitches, really nice. Alright, now the next little one is we're moving on. So with my left hand, I'm still holding all the tartan, and in the right hand, I've got my needle. Before I start stitching, I'll make sure that the northern hemisphere, that line, the red line, is slightly aft, and the southern hemisphere slightly forward. Before I start stitching, I make sure that the northern hemisphere mirrors the south. And does it? Not really, eh? Can you see this blue line is a little bit lower than that one? So what do? That's quite easy. I go to the previous one that I've stitched and I look at that one for a reference. Alright, so this one there, does it look like that? No. So this one must come in a little bit more. So what I do is I bring this one in slightly using my pin, and I pin it back in, and then this one has to come out slightly, not by much, just by a little. There we go. What do you think? So now does that mirror? Can you see that? There we go. I'm happy with that. So over here, I'm going out the blue now into the green. So with my eye now, I've got a small green bit there. Can you see there? So how many stitches do you think I'm going to be doing in there? I think maybe 3. So we go out there. That's 1. 2, 3. So can you see? In the north, I'm just in the blue. In the south, exactly the same. With my needle still at a 45-degree angle. Our next little section. So I've got that red line as my gauge. I've got my equator. Does the north look like the south? Pretty much. Again, use your eye and you be the judge. I don't want to be unpicking anything, so just take your time. Have a look. Does that look decent? Pretty much so. And with my hand, I'm just pulling it so the northern hemisphere is slightly aft. Alright. Now I'm going into the top of the blue and the bottom of the blue. How am I looking so far? Here, I'm going to the top of the red, north of the equator, to the southern equator. There we are, to the southern bit, through the equator. There we go. So whatever I do on the top, I'm doing exactly the same at the bottom. Alright, this one, I'm going out of the red into the green, so I'm in the green there. So because I'm in the green, I've got to go to the green at the bottom. There we go. So we've got that next bit there. Now as I'm moving from this red section to the blue section, it's starting to taper. Can you see that? But how much is it tapering? Well, I've got to look at this one here for a guide. So I move the pleat, the seam that I did in my previous session, which you didn't see because I stuffed up the video editing, but this is it there. There we go there. So can you see? There's a bit of green, and then it tapers to the black over there. So there's a little bit of green, tapers to the black. So I've got to now make sure that there's a little bit of green here and tapering into the black. How does that look? Good? I think so. From time to time, it's a good idea just to re-wax your thread. Alright, so I'm in the green here now. There we go. So far that's looking good. North and south look good. Alright, I'm happy with that. Take my pin out and I'll just continue on. So once I start hitting there, then it starts tapering in. Alright, so far so good. Blue into blue. Center into center. One more. End of blue into end of blue. That's that rung done. Alright, now the blacks are touching, so now I'm going into black and black. Alright, so now I take my guiding pins out and I move this black on and that black on. So now I'm into the black over there. So I'm very happy with that. Now I'm going to fold this black in, and then I'm going to be stitching green all the way up. This side looks a little bit bigger than that one, so I'm just going to make this one slightly bigger, and all I'm doing is I don't want to see the black. There we go there. Alright, so this little section is just greens, no blacks, just greens, no blacks. Alright, so I'm looking at that as a gauge, nice and tight. And from time to time you periodically just check. So the black is dissolving into the stitch. And now the green becomes the predominant color. So with this little section, it's the last little section, I've now tapered the black, so I'm not going to be seeing the black, or a very minute piece of black. That's all that I want, just as long as the north looks exactly the same as the south. So I've just got to adjust it slightly. There we go. I'm pulling my tartan nice and tight. Remember, the southern hemisphere is always forward, northern hemisphere is always aft. My needle is always going in at a 45-degree angle. Nice small stitching. I'm going through all the tartan, but I'm only going through the first layer. I'm not going through the second layer at the bottom. Alright, green done. Now, this is my last little section. Oop. And that breaks. Beautiful. So what happens when that breaks? I'm glad you asked. It's too short for me to tie off. So now I've got to stitch that in. So make a knot. Apply my wax. I move this into the equator. So it broke there, so I'll go slightly back in my southern hemisphere, pull it through, right, there's my knot with all the wax. I'll take my earnest right scissors and I just fold that knot into the equator. So the knot is now in the equator. No man's land. So there's my loop. Bring my needle through the loop and tie it off. So the previous thread is in the equator. I do it one more time. Bring it through. There's the loop. Bring my needle through, tie it off. Then I continue working up towards the waist. We've only got another inch left, an inch or so, half an inch. Just making sure that the northern hemisphere mirrors the southern hemisphere. Top of the red, top of the red. So here we're getting to the last little section, and can you see these bits of frayed? But that's alright, you won't see that once I put the band on. So I stitch all the way through. If I don't stitch through, then it will start to fray. So these last little bits here, I'll bring it through the loop again, tie it off. Bring it through again, tie it off. Now I don't have much thread left, so I've done that twice. Now over here, I take it in the southern hemisphere towards the back, towards the top, bring it around and tie it off. Then I go to the northern hemisphere to the top, bring it through the loop and tie it off. There we go. That's it. Done. So let's see what the stitch looks like. Now remember, because I was pulling the northern hemisphere back and the southern hemisphere forward, I've got to now massage so that both hemispheres are nicely equal. So what I'm doing is I'm moving north to the top and south to the bottom. So I'm just massaging it slightly, and there we go. So can you see a beautiful, beautiful stitch? Nice and even. Top mirroring the south, north and south the same. Tapering nicely in. Going out slightly here. And there it is there. Can you even see those stitches? Can you even see them? So as a kilt maker, Now I did this one like on my previous presentation, right? So what I'm doing now is when I look at this, I've got to make sure now that this one is the same as that one. Now I haven't finished the buttonhole. This is what I'm going to be doing in the next presentation. Alright, so remember, this is my first, which I leave, second one, which is the buttonhole, and this is where I'm going to be putting in my strap. This I'll talk about in another presentation, but because I messed up with my video and my editing, I just want you guys to realize that this one is this one here. Okay, so when I look back, does this look the same as that? Alright, so what I'm looking for is north to south. Do those match up? Is the northern equator, the northern hemisphere, the same as the southern hemisphere? Now remember, that goes like that, and then it tapers in, right? So it goes like that and tapers in. That's the intention. Once I'm on that line there, then it's parallel. So this tapers all the way in to that line there, and then it's parallel. Does this look the same as that? I think so. Job done. Beautiful. Well, there we go. Another beautiful seam stitched, and my client is going to be over the moon when he sees that. Really, really well done. In the next presentation, I'm going to be showing you how to stitch the buttonhole and how to do the bar tack. So I'm going to be using my strap, and I'm going to be stitching the bar tack. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned for the next part. Talk to you soon.